Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, Amen, Namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, the Honorable Maxi Cuffy MP, member for La Hoketa, Talparo, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House for the month of June 2018. And Mr. Fazal Karim MP, member for Shogunas East, has requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, I have received the following correspondence from the President of the Senate dated June 5, 2018. Dear Honorable Speaker, establishment of the Joint Select Committee. Your letter dated May 28, 2018 on the subject at caption. I wish to advise that at a sitting held on Tuesday, June 5, 2018, the Senate concurred with the House on the establishment of a Joint Select Committee to consider and report by July 31, 2018 on Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018. And the following 6 members were appointed to serve on the committee: Mr. Franklin Cand, Ms. Alison West, Mr. Robert Lee Hunt, Mr. Wade Mark, Mr. Torrell Shikisoon, and Ms. Jennifer Raful. Additionally, at the said sitting on Tuesday, June 5, 2018, the Senate concurred with the House on the establishment of a Joint Select Committee to consider and report by June 30, 2018 on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018, the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, and the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018. And the following 6 members were appointed to serve on the committee: Mr. Clarence Rambarat, Mr. Lester Henry, Mr. Daniel Duki, Mr. Saddam Hussein, Mr. Stephen Crease, Mr. Paul Richards. Accordingly, I respectfully request that the House of Representatives be informed of this decision at the earliest convenience, please. Respectfully, Senator the Honorable Christine Kanklu, President of the Senate.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees.
Member for San Fernando West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the distinct honor to present the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2018.
Prime Minister's questions. Urgent questions.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of National Security, with regard to reports indicating that the residents of Rampanalgas village, Toko, have administered a self-imposed curfew due to an increase in criminal activity in the area, could the Minister indicate how the Ministry intends to address this situation?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it has been noted from publication in the media of a self-imposed curfew in that area in the Eastern Police Division of Rampanalgas. Following a series of violent incidents in that district, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has responded with intensive and extensive policing presence throughout the district on a 24/7 basis. Several suspects have been arrested and interrogated, and one such suspect has been charged for a series of offenses, including firearm-related offenses. The present feedback from the community is that they are very satisfied with the work of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and the Eastern Division officers are in fact committed to the continuation of the improved policing services to that community, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental question. Member for Oropouche West.
Honourable Minister, why has this situation allowed to reach this unmanageable state before something was done?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I'm not quite sure what the member means by unmanageable state, but I can assure you and I can assure the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular the community of Rampanalgas, that the police and Eastern Division will continue to assure a presence in a timely and an able manner to ensure the safety and security of the people, in particular in the Eastern Division.
Supplemental question. Member for Oropouche West.
So is the police in the Eastern Police Station, are they properly resourced to deal with situations like these?
Minister of National Security.
I think we refer to the Eastern Division.
Yeah.
In the Eastern Division, yes, the police are, and in fact, anyway, and any time they are short of resources, this government of Trinidad and Tobago will ensure that they have the necessary resources to do their job effectively and efficiently.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Fitzgerald who is stuck in traffic outside, to the Minister of Works and Transport, in light of a recent near-fatal accident involving a motorist and an asphalt spreading machine, could the Minister inform this House of the safety measures currently in place to protect the motorists while using the South Trunk Road, La Romaine, which is currently under construction to facilitate the Point Fortin Highway?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we confirm that there was an incident where a vehicle ran into the back of a spreader. The Ministry is currently awaiting an accident report with the details of the incident. Generally, when work is being done of this nature, signage is in place and the presence of police officers to ensure roads traffic safety. Thank you.
Supplemental question. Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister, has anyone been identified and being held responsible for this accident, either the driver or the contractor?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam Speaker, as I said before, we are waiting an accident report. However, because this is a road traffic accident, a police report will determine who was right and who was wrong in this incident.
Member for Point of Peer. The member for Fitzgerald is here. Member for Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Minister, for that response. Minister, can you indicate when the highway will be completed so that motorists will not be susceptible to injury from a construction zone?
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this highway was supposed to be completed before 2015. However, due to unforeseen circumstances with the contractor OAS Construction, it was restarted in 2016, and we expect that highway to be completed early 2020. Thank you.
Member for Oropouche West.
Minister of National Security, with regard to the recent murder of a state witness, could the Minister indicate to this House what is the status of the witness protection program in Trinidad and Tobago?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I wonder if the member may wish to clarify which state witness to which she referred to, and then I can probably answer the question clearly.
Which one? I didn't get.
Which state notice do you refer, so that I can answer your question quite
The
clearly?
watermelon vendor from Gasparillo, Samaru, Mr. Samaru.
Minister of National
Thank you very much for that clarification. Madam Speaker, I wish to inform the member that Mr. Samaru was, in fact, as she referred to him, the watermelon person in Gasparillo, was not in the witness protection program. He was a witness to an offense, but he was not in the witness protection program.
Honorable Minister, could you indicate to this House how many witnesses, who are state witnesses, have been murdered since 2016 and 2018?
Supplemental question. I would ask members to please observe the rules of decorum. Member for Naparima, supplemental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given that state witnesses are critical to the crime reduction in Trinidad and Tobago, what special measures are in place to protect persons who volunteer to be state witnesses?
That's a supplemental question. Member for Princess.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister, in light of the answer that you provided, could you indicate to this Honourable House, saying that he was a witness to an offence, why he wasn't incorporated into the state witness program?
Madam Speaker, for a witness to be in the witness protection program, he or she must volunteer to be in that program. And there are certain protocols that are involved for them to be entered into the witness protection program. I have no information that Mr. Samuel was volunteered to be in the witness protection program.
Member for Point of Pear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of National Security, based on a recent report that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is closely monitoring activity at Beetham Gardens and East Port of Spain in anticipation of an all-out gang war between the two communities, could the Minister indicate whether the recent proclamation of the Anti-Gang 2018 Act would provide some relief in this situation?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I'm not quite sure whether the member have the evidence that there's an all-out gang warfare in the Beetham area. But as far as based on advice and information I have from the Commissioner of Police, while there has been recent homicide in the Beetham and in Belmont area, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is not aware of any gang war pending in the Port of Spain Division. Nevertheless, the Port of Spain Division has a clear plan of action designed to deal with criminal activity, including those related to gangs. Port of Spain Division is effectively supported by the Interagency Task Force, the Guard and Emergency Branch, the Court and Process Branch, the Organized Crime and Intelligence Unit, and the CID. Madam Speaker, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service are sufficiently prepared to treat any issues within the gang violence in Trinidad and Tobago.
Supplementary question, member for Point of Pear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister, since the proclamation of the Anti-Gang Act in 2018, could you state how many arrests have been made?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I cannot say how many arrests have been made, but I know for sure I can say that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service have taken preactive measures in terms of preparing and training discussion with the DPP in anticipation of the Anti-Gang Act. And as I mentioned before, they are prepared to deal with any eventualities related to gang-related offenses in Trinidad and Tobago.
Questions on notice. Questions for oral answer.
Just before I call on you, Leader of the House, might I just call to the attention of members of the House the presence of Form 4 students of the Tranquility Government Secondary School and their teachers. Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. There are 9 oral questions. We will be answering 8. We are asking for deferral of question 241 for 2 weeks. There are 6 written questions. We will be answering 5, and we are asking for deferral of question 242 for 2 weeks. Thank you very kindly.
The leave is so granted. Question, member for Naparima.
Question number 226 to the Minister of Tourism.
Minister of Tourism.
Government has recognized that tourist arrivals to Trinidad and Tobago have been on a gradual decline since the high of 514,000 visitors to our islands in 2009. As a consequence of this decline, government took steps in 2017 to arrest this decline by improving the effectiveness of marketing the destination's tourism offerings, and in so doing, government seeks to provide a more efficient and coordinated approach to the management of the tourism sector.
House whether negative travel advisories have anything to do with the reduction in arrivals, and if so, what strategies are in place to deal with it?
Madam Speaker, negative travel advisories would perhaps have an adverse effect on the tourist arrivals, but more than that, Madam Speaker, the ineffective destination marketing and branding of the destinations would have had a greater effect.
If the minister is placing confidence in destination marketing, why are we not seeing any ads whatsoever on international TV marketing Trinidad and Tobago as a destination for tourists?
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, perhaps the member for Naparima is unaware, but last year the government took steps to change the institutional arrangements as it relates to the tourism sector. The TDC was dissolved, and in its place, 2 new entities. And right now, we're in a state of transition. And pretty soon, the Trinidad tourism entity will be operationalized, and you will see all the advertisements to your delight so that we can encourage tourists again to these shores.
Confidence in his future plans to bring tourists to Trinidad and Tobago. Has he set any targets, realistic, identifiable targets, so we could have confidence that his strategies will work?
Madam Speaker, I can happily report that this minister has a lot of confidence in the Prime Minister and Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, and I do have confidence in the new institutional arrangements that are now being put in place. The strategic plan will be underway shortly, and soon we will set the targets and we can report to this House what those targets are.
Madam Chair, question number 227 to the Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, as submitted in the response to House of Representatives question number 56 on January the 12th, 2018, matters relating to the detention of nationals abroad are more appropriately directed to the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, as the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations enshrines the right of consuls to communicate with, assist, and safeguard the rights and interests of detained nationals. The consular division of that ministry performs these essential functions. Notwithstanding this, Madam Speaker, it was further submitted that information received by the Ministry of National Security indicated that the government of Trinidad and Tobago was investigating reports that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago were being held at an Iraqi detention camp. At present, intelligence received by the Ministry of National Security indicates that 4 Trinidad and Tobago nationals are currently detained by Iraqi authorities. 3 of these are serving 20-year sentences for crimes committed, and 1 individual is awaiting trial. The status of any other national who may or may not be detained in Iraq at this point in time is yet to be confirmed, Madam Speaker.
Does the Minister have any information on the charges that were laid against these citizens? And if they were families of those involved in terrorist activity?
Minister of National Security.
Wives and children.
Madam Speaker, that information, I'm sure the members aware, can be received on the internet. I'm sure you can do a search and see that was published on the internet with respect to those who were charged and the situation dealt with, and was in fact in our media. I'm sure you can get that information.
Supplemental, member for Naparim.
As other governments did we provide minimal legal support to our citizens so detained? United States, Canada.
Minister of National Security. Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, the Trinidad and Tobago government did not provide any legal assistance to the persons charging it. And none was requested. And therefore, in fact, as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, I think we've answered a question in this House where, in terms of diplomatic relations with Iraq, don't exist, and we have to actually go out of our way to get information out of Iraq. And we won't of any other country that have done so.
Member for Princeton.
Speaker. Madam Speaker, question number 239 to the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with regard to Part A of the question, 3 official ICC one-day matches were played at the Brian Lara Cricket Academy post-May 2017. The 2017 Sri Lankan women tournament, Sri Lanka women versus West Indies women, was held during the period October 11, 2017 to October 15, 2017. Madam Speaker, with regard to Part B of the question, no official test matches have been played at the Brian Lara Cricket Academy to date. Cricket West Indies and the International Cricket Council are presently taking steps to have the grounds certified for test matches.
Supplemental member for Princeton.
Thank you, Madam. Madam is the Honourable Minister confirming that after $1.2 billion has been spent, and this is a priority project of her administration, that there are no ICC sanctioned matches with respect to test matches played at the stadium.
Member, Minister of
It's
Sport
1 year.
and Youth Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I don't know if the member heard clearly, but right now, presently, Madam Speaker, ICC, along with Cricket West Indies, are actively working on getting the venue certified.
Supplemental member for Princeton.
Madam, I know that the Minister has admitted that she doesn't know much about sports, but could the Minister indicate whether or not any official ICC teams has started to make the prerequisites site visits, 3 site visits, to have the ground accredited?
Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Madam Speaker, ICC has been in conversation with officials of the government of Trinidad and Tobago through state enterprises, and arrangements have been made for active visits to take place there for ICC accreditation. I hope the member reads the news and follow up what's taking place rather than to come here and make silly remarks.
Member for Princeton.
Madam, to the Honourable Minister, talk is one thing, but in order for the ground to be accredited, it requires site visits
Member
from
for
ICC. Has ICC...
Member for Princeton. Members. This is a warning to both sides. Okay? There's a certain decorum that is expected here. Tolerance is expected here. And as Speaker, I will regulate who speaks, when, and uphold the standing orders. I'm glad for the assistance, but please allow me the latitude to do what I'm here to do. Member for Princeton.
Thank you, Madam. Madam, the question remains, could the Honourable Minister indicate whether any ICC officials have visited the Brian Lara Stadium as part of the prerequisition in order for it to be accredited?
Member?
She hasn't said whether they're here or they visited.
No, she hasn't.
I'd like to caution members. If they find it difficult to be tolerant, then maybe a little exercise outside will assist. Member for Princeton, that question was already asked and answered. If you have another supplemental question, you're entitled to ask it. Member for Princeton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, question number 240 to the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Madam Speaker, the Brian Lara Cricket Academy and Stadium is being maintained by the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Supplemental. Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question number 236 to the Minister of Trade and Industry.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Madam Speaker, the Artist Portfolio Development Program was launched by the Trinidad and Tobago Music Company Limited, Music TT, on December 9th, 2017. The program commenced with a musical showcase consisting of 30 artists. These artists were assessed by an independent international panel of music experts and were evaluated based on their performances. Based on the adjudication by the international expert panel, 9 solo artists and 2 bands were selected. At the showcase on December 9th, each of the selected artists was analyzed by the international panel of music experts to determine their individual needs. This analysis is being used to generate a detailed 6-month plan, which is currently being developed by Music TT, outlining the necessary steps for these artists to become export ready. Based on the information outlined in this plan, Music TT, with the support of local and international music professionals, will work with these artists to improve various elements of their value chain, such as marketing, legal, publishing, and sales. This developmental work for artists is expected to commence in the last week in June 2018. Thank you.
Supplemental member for Point of View.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister of Trade. You mentioned 9 soloists and 2 bands. Are these individuals and bands under contract, and what is their compensation?
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you. But these individuals and the 2 bands have not yet been contracted, and they are not yet being paid. But they are also being used under another program in the meantime.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 246, Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the current economic challenges facing Venezuela has naturally contributed to push and pull factors where Venezuelan nationals migrate to Trinidad and Tobago and other neighboring countries in the hope of finding economic relief from their situation. Unfortunately, many of these Venezuelans entering through legal and illegal ports of entry risk being ill-treated and exploited by unscrupulous persons. Claims of ill treatment and exploitation made by any foreign national are thoroughly investigated by the enforcement unit of the Immigration Division. Or, depending on the nature of the report, the matter may be referred to the relevant unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for investigation to be conducted. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of National Security, through this counter-trafficking unit, continues to adopt a multidisciplinary task force and victim-centered approach to treating with all potential victims of exploitation to bring to justice those responsible for such acts. As it currently stands, various agencies under the Ministry of National Security continue to provide support through the provisions of intelligence, investigations, and manpower to execute operations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The government intends to continue to use this approach to investigate all reports of suspected human trafficking and the exploitation of both local and migrants. Victims of human trafficking continue to receive reasonable protection where possible, access to shelters, counseling, regularization of immigration status, repatriation, and resettlement if they so desire, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental member for Oropouche West.
Honourable Minister, have there been any reports of Venezuelans trading guns for food?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I'm not aware, based on my information on Trinidad and Tobago Police, but I know the Trinidad and Tobago Police continue to monitor the security environment. If such things happen, they will address it as deemed necessary, Madam Speaker.
Member for Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 250 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, the illumination of parks and recreation facilities is a component of the National Street Lighting Program. Approval for the illumination is based on the following conditions: ownership of the grounds, proximity to other illuminated grounds, public access to facilities, presence of infrastructure, example pavilions, walking tracks, exercise tracks, etc., availability of funding. An application has been received by the Ministry of Public Utilities for the illumination of the open space of land at like post number 3, Bush Village, Guapo Road, Faizabad. A site visit was conducted by the staff of the Ministry of Public Utilities, and the application is currently being evaluated against the aforementioned criteria. A final decision is expected to be made shortly.
Supplemental member for Faizabad.
Thank you for that response, Minister. Minister, can you indicate where the process for the application, which will have been made for a neighboring ground which already has infrastructure, namely that of Hickling Village? Can you shed some light on that at all?
Minister of Public Utilities.
Yes, we are in possession. I've noticed that we do have an application for Hickling Village. That is also being considered. The process is that we have just recently gotten that application and an evaluation process with regard to finding out what's the cost of doing that particular and passing it through the criteria, and doing a cost-benefit analysis is being done.
Member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 251 to the Minister of Planning and Development.
Minister of Planning and Development.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, searches of the records of the Town and Country Planning Division, Ministry of Planning and Development, have revealed no applications for the building of a car park located opposite the Children's Court, Delhi Road Junction, Faizabad Road, Faizabad. A site visit was also conducted by officers of the division, which confirmed that there is no actual construction currently being undertaken on the site. Should an application be made for the building of a car park at this location, the timeline for the Town and Country Planning Division's approval process will be the statutory time allowed under the Town and Country Planning Act, Chapter 3501, which states, and I quote, 2 months or such extended periods as may at any time be agreed upon in writing between the applicant and the Minister of Planning and Development. Thank you very kindly, Madam.
Supplemental member for Faizabad.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that response. Minister, are you aware that there's currently at the site that I identified a filling in which cars are parking, and it can create a dangerous situation with the potential for being washed away? Are you aware of that situation?
Minister of Planning and Development.
I am not so aware.
Supplemental.
Yes.
Member for Faizabad, supplemental.
Minister, can you then, in the interest of public safety, perhaps have someone look at that spot and look at that site being undertaken?
Madam Speaker, I indicated in my response that there was a site visit, and we have no such information. And if there is such a development, the regional corporation, I'm sure, will access the site and make the requisite changes that need to be made. Yes, it is. UNC Control Corporation.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, committee business, motions.
Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very warmly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that this House take note of the report of the Special Select Committee established to consider and report on the process followed in relation to the notifications pursuant to Section 123 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, at a sitting of this House on Friday, the 2nd of February, 2018, a special select committee was established by the House of Representatives to consider and report on the process. As was agreed by this House, this committee had a mandate as follows: to obtain information, documentation, and/or evidence relevant to and touching and concerning the method, process, criterion, and considerations utilized by the Police Service Commission and/or the firm employed by the Police Service Commission in the selection of candidates for the position of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, to enable the House of Representatives to consider the notifications submitted to it by His Excellency, the President, pursuant to Section 123 of the Constitution, of course, as he then was. The committee members were appointed. Members of this House were appointed to this Special Select Committee, yours truly, Mr. Randall Mitchell, Madam Nicole Olivierre, Mr. Terence Dayal Singh, Mr. Ganga Singh, and Dr. Rudal Munilal. At the first meeting held on February 16, 2018, your committee elected yours truly, the member for Laventille West, to be its chairman in accordance with Standing Order 96.4 of the House of Representatives and Standing Order 86.3 of the Senate. Our committee was supported by a strong and able secretariat led by Mrs. Jackie Sampson Miguel as its head. Madam Speaker, at the sitting of the House of Representatives held on February 2nd, 2018, the debate on the motion to approve the notification of the President of the nomination by the Police Service Commission of Mr. Deodat Dalal Chan to the Office of Commissioner of Police was adjourned to a later date to enable this Special Select Committee to obtain further information that may be necessary to assist this House with that debate whenever that arises again. The responsibility, Madam Speaker, for the recruitment of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police rests with the Police Service Commission under Section 123 of the Constitution. This section provides that the Police Service Commission shall nominate persons for the appointment to the offices specified in accordance with the criteria and procedure prescribed by an order of the President, subject to negative resolution of the Parliament. The existing and the relevant orders of which we speak are the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police Selection Process Order 2015, known as Legal Notice number 218 of 2015, and the appointment of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police Qualification and Selection Criteria Order 2015, reflected in Legal Notice number 219 of 2015. The Legal Notice number 219 of 2015 identifies the minimum qualifications for the Office of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. That legal notice outlines very carefully the selection procedure prescribed, such order, such order, one would recall, was amended by the court to remove any provision requiring the Police Service Commission to act in accordance with the directions from any other body or person. The court did that in the matter of Haridath Maharaj versus the Attorney General, and the judge in that matter was, as he then was, Mr. Justice Raj Kumar. So the relevant part of the order is that which remained after certain provisions of it were exercised by Mr. Justice Raj Kumar. Excised after the exercise of his legal prudence and acumen. So that what we have now is the result of that excision as reflected in that legal notice. In our view, the order attempts to define a trustworthy process directed by the Police Service Commission only, with the final selections being made by the Police Service Commission only for onward transmission to the House of Representatives via Her Excellency. Madam Speaker, what then was the process that was followed by the PSC? What we relate to you today, Madam Speaker, is what we as a committee actually found. And we issued a report, a very voluminous report, copies of which are available to all members of this House. Our assignment was to find the facts and the documents and to present them to you. We looked at the procedure only, not at individuals or personalities. And even in so doing, we did not even name names. We used the code in order to achieve that. The Police Service Commission on its own, with no outside interference or coercion, shall commission a firm, so the order says, to undertake a technical assessment of the applicants for Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of Police in an assessment center. At the end of the assessment, the firm shall submit to the Police Service Commission the results of its assessment as contracted and mandated, inclusive of its assessors' scores and the best practice security vetting reports obtained. These results and reports would then be considered by the Police Service Commission. The Police Service Commission would then undertake further evaluations and considerations as may be agreed by the Police Service Commission and arrive at selections for the posts of Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of Police. Instead of that, clearly defined in the order, the Police Service Commission on its own, with no outside interference or coercion, commissioned KPMG, a firm, to undertake a technical assessment of the applicants for Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. So the firm KPMG was contracted and mandated to perform an assessment center role at all times directed by the Police Service Commission. That cost the taxpayers of this country, Madam Speaker, $3.2 million or thereabouts, slightly less than the last time we undertook this exercise. The firm, as I said, was contracted and mandated to send to the Police Service Commission the results of its assessment, inclusive of the assessor's scores and vetting reports. However, the Police Service Commission itself engaged in the assessment as opposed to merely directing it. Therefore, what was sent to the Police Service Commission in the final stage, as the order expected, after all the assessments were concluded, were arguably the assessment results of the Police Service Commission in the form of two lists in an order of ranking, one for COP and the other for DCOP. While other assessors were engaged along with the Police Service Commission at all times, the Police Service Commission not only directed, Madam Speaker, but participated intimately in the assessment process in a most overwhelming manner, in scoring at crucial stages of the assessment process. The police service claimed that this was necessary, and that was its way of owning, in inverted commas, owning the process. Perusal, Madam Speaker, our committee found, perusal of the order of the court of the President, as amended by Mr. Justice Raj Kumar, perusal of his judgment, and perusal of an opinion that was issued to the Police Service Commission by senior counsel on that matter, this committee found that nothing in those documents authorized the Police Service Commission to participate as intimately in the process as it did and as it defended by claiming that it did so in order to own the process. With nothing more, Madam Speaker, no further evaluations or interviews, etc., the Police Service Commission then came up at the end of this process, where they were supposed under the order to have gotten involved on its own. They then came up with two order of merit lists that defy our logic from our reading and understanding of the entire process. These lists differed from the list, Madam Speaker, arrived at the end of the assessment stages that the firm was supposed to have undertaken, as I indicated, as it occurred with the intimate involvement of the Police Service Commission. The report before the House, in the fulfillment of its mandate to this House, gives a full description of the process, followed by the Commission in this procedure. 54 applications were received by the firm. Applications were required to applicants were required to utilize the prescribed application form and to indicate clearly on the front of the form whether they were applying for the post of COP, the post of DCOP, or whether they were applying for both. 50 such applicants were deemed eligible and 4 were deemed ineligible since they did not satisfy the basic qualification requirements as outlined in Legal Notice number 219 of 2015 for either post. Of the 50 eligible applications, 20 candidates applied for both the positions of COP and DCOP. 26 applied for the position of DCOP only, and 4 candidates applied for the position of Commissioner only. The process, Madam Speaker, resulted in persons who did not apply for the position of Commissioner of Police at all, emerging on the top of the list based on the outcome from the Police Service Commission. The Police Service Commission then selected a short list of 20 candidates based on a passing grade of 60% in the preliminary stage screening to undergo assessment for the 2 positions. The assessment was made up of 2 stages. Stage 1 included a psychometric evaluation that carried 10%, panel interview that carried 50%, written case study 10%, stakeholder and media role 15%, role fit for COP, DCOP 15%. And then stage 2, Madam Speaker, the Police Service Commission panel interview, which carried 60%. This was a specially constituted interview panel consisting primarily of members of the Police Service Commission and some KPMG personnel. The panel comprised of Commissioners Gomes, who was then the chairman, Ramkisoon, and Commodore Franklin, sitting along with KPMG's assessors. The interview comprised preset questions that were designed to test the candidates' depth of knowledge and recommendation on areas of financial, people, public, and process. Candidates were asked a standard list of questions, according to the PSC, to ensure fairness in the process, as well as complementary questions to allow candidates to expand on answers provided. Part 2 of that stage 2 involved a role fit for COP and DCOP, 40% marks that carried. Candidates were scored from 1 to 10, graded from 1 to 10, in the following fit evaluation categories, developed based on the following characteristics and traits sought in the position of COP and DCOP. These were leadership traits, values, character traits, and culture. At the end of the assessment stages, Madam Speaker, the firm forwarded to the PSC the results of its assessment process and the report on its assessment of the entire assessment process. The firm submitted combined assessment center results, which appeared to be the combination of the results of stages 1 and 2 as I outlined. And there, the firm reported, and I quote, "It is the police services," and they reported, "It is the police services' intention to utilize these scores, the summary of the candidate's performance across all assessment center activities, and the results of various security and professional vetting checks to determine the order of merit lists for the positions of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police." Madam Speaker, I must say here that in all previous similar processes, polygraphing was conducted on each of the applicants. In this process, not a single person chosen and submitted on the order of merit list was even polygraphed. And I say even because today, in today's world, polygraphing is not the best practice. There are other improved techniques that are available for such testing. But that is a separate matter. Madam Speaker, your committee observed the firm utilized a single leadership competency framework to assess the candidates regardless of the post they applied for. That's all well and good. A single leadership competency framework could make sense, except that it would have been practically impossible to devise a fair and transparent assessment process for each position without any discernible differentiations and scoring made between the posts. In response to these questions over and over again from your committee, raised by members of the committee, we were told a number of things, including they told us while there are unique sets of behaviors for both posts, the deputy can act at any point in time for the commissioner, so there was no need to differentiate. That's what we were told. We were also told that the process was not geared towards who applied for what position, that it was a talent pool strategy where they basically got a pool of talent to find the best person for the job. We were also told, Madam Speaker, what would really differentiate the posts would be things like vision, whether you could motivate people, whether you could inspire confidence in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. These are the things that will really differentiate now between a deputy commissioner and a commissioner. However, Madam Speaker, there is no indication of any rating scheme for each post across each of the exercises. None, nothing. So did they guess who to place where? We were never able to understand that cleanly. It confused members of your committee. A rating scheme for each job was critical, especially given that they told us they were funneling down using one competency framework. Such a clearly defined scheme for each post at the start of the process would have mitigated against the risk by using one leadership competency framework for two separate jobs. It was clear from the oral and written evidence that the Police Service Commission decided that it was proper to participate in the assessment stages based on their interpretation of the judgment of the court in Haridat Maraj and the Attorney General, and on the written and oral advice they received from senior counsel. In particular, the Police Service Commission sought to comply with the judge's words that they were to own the process, and they therefore participated, as I indicated earlier, in the selection process. The process for the selection of COP and DCOP is guided by the law, Madam Speaker, made in pursuant to our Constitution and reflected in Legal Notice number 218 of 2015. Additionally, the exercise was one of top-level or for top-level executive recruitment. Therefore, the committee found that the decision of the Police Service Commission to actively and intimately participate in the assessment stage and the role they were to play in the assessment stage should have been stipulated in writing at the very outset of the process for transparency and to notify the applicants. This was not done. This was of vital importance, your committee found, since the law places a specific duty on the Police Service Commission after, and I emphasize the word after, the end of the assessment process, namely, to review the results of the assessment, engage in further evaluations, and then make final decisions. There was very good reason for this, Madam Speaker. Very, very good reason. The Police Service Commission was to be assisted by the provision of an objective assessment report on every candidate. This was in an effort to minimize subjectivity and bias and to ensure that the selections made by the Police Service Commission at the end of the day could stand the test of scrutiny, public and legal. And bearing in mind, Madam Speaker, that the role generally under the Constitution of the Police Service Commission is to appoint, it is to monitor, it is to discipline the ranks concerned here, DCOP and COP. So they would have had ongoing contact with the personnel holding those offices, received complaints, had responses from them, They had been assessing them all along on their work ethic and in their general monitoring and their duty as members of the commission. And therefore, this process for selection was supposed to be what it is to avoid, as I said, subjectivity and previous knowledge and contact and decisions made on the basis of other contact outside of this process. Very good reason. Based on HR advice we received, human resource expertise that we had at our disposal, members were of the view that if the Police Service Commission had opted to have its members design and even attend to observe the assessment processes, as opposed to intimately and directly participating, that would have been more in accord with the dictates of the order, the law. Also, quite shockingly, not one single person involved in this assessment exercise, including the Police Service Commissioners, can be considered an HR expert in executive recruitment using assessment center techniques. This, Madam Speaker, came to us on the basis of the evidence of their resumes and our questions to them. We heard they had experience in recruiting in different organizations and so on, but none on the business of executive recruitment. Interestingly, the Police Service Commission as well ejected the Director of Public Personnel Administration and the Secretariat from its process. This DPA and that is the Secretariat to the Commission. They would have garnered a certain amount of experience. They would have been through this before, but for reasons best known to the Commission, they were ejected totally from the process. Even the records were not kept by them, but it was kept by a project manager appointed by the Police Service Commission on short term for that purpose. And they told us in their evidence before us that they did that in order to ensure that they were not dictated to by anyone. Not being dictated to appears to have meant to them being able to do that which they did, their own thing as it were. So, Madam Speaker, the prerogatives and choices they exercised, which they claim were based on interpretations guided by senior counsel of what the judge said, were, in the view of the committee, incautious, and perhaps there's a view that it was even reckless. The committee heard that 2 members of the Police Service Commission who participated in the assessment stages had prior working relationship with certain candidates. The committee therefore questioned them and sought to determine how the risk of bias could be dealt with. They admitted to us that yes, there was a risk of bias on that basis alone, but that we learned from the then chairman that they were trained by KPMG to eliminate such bias, and that they went into the process with no predispositions on account of their usual functioning as members of the Police Service Commission and their contact with these officers in the course of that regular operation. Additionally, KPMG informed the committee that it utilized a documented policy to address issues of potential bias during the assessment stage. However, when we looked closely at it, the documented policy used to address issues of potential bias during the assessment stage was wholly unsatisfactory for this level of executive recruitment. Critically, no further checks, Madam Speaker, were done when members of the Commission declared to it, the Commission, that they had prior knowledge of candidates. The committee questioned them to find out whether they made further investigations into those declarations, because they were told that it was from a long time past and it had come to an end. The committee questioned the Police Service Commission as to whether they further investigated those declarations. They did not. They admitted to us that they did not. No effort was made to mitigate the risk of bias by separating assessors from the candidates, notwithstanding that they indicated that they had knowledge of them. Candidates were not at any point until very, very late, the last stage, they were not made aware that they were being assessed for both jobs, that in fact they were being funneled down. This, from the expert advice we had, is totally unacceptable. And perhaps disadvantageous to some persons. You are in a process and you don't know which of the positions you were being assessed for. You applied for one position, you ended up on a list for another. These are the things that your committee discovered. They had no clue. The Police Service Commission, the candidates, had no clue that it mattered not which position they applied for. They had no clue that only one score was being applied for the two posts. They had no clue that even before they were asked, determinations were being made with no discernible assessment guideline as to which job they were best suited to. And, Madam Speaker, I must tell you here, and this for the jobs of commissioner and deputy, and I must tell you that the commission told your committee that they put to every candidate at a late stage that, well, they inquired of them whether they were willing to be considered for either position, notwithstanding which one they applied for. We had unsolicited commentary from from at least one candidate who told our committee that no such question was put to him. Two candidates, I'm being reminded. Thank you very much, Member Mitchell, who was a part, the member for San Fernando East, who was a part of your committee, Madam Speaker. I did comment upon the paucity of the vetting, not even polygraph. In today's world, Madam Speaker, when we are recruiting prison officers at the lowest rank, Coast Guards officers, soldiers, police officers, their pictures are routinely put in the public domain for public intervention and commentary. A member of the public could easily show up to say, I had an encounter with that man who robbed me, and identify him. And that can generate issues for his recruitment. In this process, in executive recruitment, there was no polygraphing, and the public were not even given an opportunity, as they do with constables. I am submitting, our committee found that this could not, and this was a matter of law, this requirement for best practice security vetting is a legal requirement in the order. And I'm submitting that what was done in terms of security could never meet the test of best practice. In addition to that, the firm KPMG did an aspect of it, and having reported, other questions arose as to the security vetting of certain applicants. And it was then a more full investigation was done, which led to a report from the SSA, and which led to other information coming to hand, which led to the commission now having been split on that point, taking votes. The thing was very, very, very tenuous, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, at the end of all of that, the Police Service Commission established two order of merit lists, one for the Office of Commissioner and the other for the Office of Deputy Commissioner. These lists, Madam Speaker, differed from the lists arrived at the end of their own assessment stage. So here we are. The firm was supposed to have done it and then report to the independent PSC. That did not happen. They participated intimately in the assessment, scoring everything. And then the report of the assessment then went to the Police Service Commission simpliciter, as it was supposed to have done. The list that came from the assessment differs from the list that they eventually threw up to Her Excellency, which will find itself in this House for consideration later. All defying logic. And when members of the House read these reports in great detail and you see the scoring, you would see situations where persons who scored more than others at the end of the assessment stage ended up being recommended for the position as opposed to persons who scored less. You would see when you read the details, members, I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry. So confusing it was. So confusing it was. Let me restate that. When you peruse the details here, you will see that there are cases where persons who scored less emerged higher on the order of merit list than those who did otherwise. Right? So, Madam Speaker, we observed from the evidence that came to us that the PSC did no further interviews at the end stage as I described, where they were supposed to take all matters into account. Yet, one commissioner, one member of the Police Service Commission, who took absolutely no part in the assessment stage, he came in at that final stage and he contributed to the decision by scoring on the basis of the said assessment. In other words, the committee had to wonder on what basis would that commissioner, who had no dealings with or interface with these candidates in this process, on what basis would he have been able to sit in a so-called border count test and score persons with no further interviews, with no further interface between the commission and the candidates? It defies logic. There appeared, Madam Speaker, to have been some challenges at this stage. For about 6 weeks, from the evidence we got, the Police Service Commission was mulling around with the assessment center report and told us they did not know how to resolve the thing to end up with the final order of merit list, until one commissioner showed up one day and suggested to them that he found out something about a border count. They said, wow, that was a miracle. That's on the Hansard. Miracle on the Hansard. And they then decided after 6 weeks of pulling their hair, my words, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do, they then decided that they would use this border count formula, which they sought to explain, and as I indicated, came up with a list that was different from the assessment stage listing. There were issues regarding security vetting. I think I alluded to this before, but let me, for clarity, say one candidate had been under investigation by the Police Complaints Authority, who ultimately, and after a protracted investigation, recommended the consideration of disciplinary charges by the Police Service Commission against that particular candidate. Another candidate had an adverse finding or commentary by a judge in the course of a matter that he might have been the complainant in. Based on legal advice, the Police Service Commission decided not to pursue any disciplinary charges against the candidate in question, and also to disregard the findings of the court in relation to the other. When questioned, they told us that part of the reason, if not all of it, why they took the decision not to discipline a particular candidate was that there was some judgment that suggested after a period of time they ought not so to do. We took note of that, and you, Madam Speaker, and this House will take note for what that is worth. Consequently, as I said, the border count formula was used. There was no evidence that this formula was discussed in detail and approved in advance of the commencement of this executive recruitment process. Typically, there should be agreement from the outset as to how decisions will be made in the event of unforeseen situations, identical scoring, and other such tricky issues. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, the focus of your committee was not on the candidates. It was on the process. Your special select committee had no agenda other than to discover information and facts on the process and to share it with this House. That we have done. That is what was asked of us, and that we have done. We have in this report submitted all documentation and other information received to the House, as requested by this Honorable House. A detailed review of the documentation submitted is, in my view, essential to a thorough understanding of this process. So persons may comment without having read all of it, or in some cases, none of it. But it would be advisable, it is advisable, to study it very carefully in support of the work of your committee. The report we have provided to this House presents, in our view, an accurate and truthful account on the process utilized in leading to the order of merit lists. The committee took a non-partisan approach to its work, and where there were disagreements, as there were, efforts were made in order to reflect all the findings in this report. All the facts that the committee were able to obtain are contained in the report. In our view, Madam Speaker, the process was unsound, unsafe, and unsatisfactory. It ought not, therefore, on that basis, to stand. That is the view of your committee. Perhaps because, with all of its flaws and imperfections, nothing good could come of it. Before I take my seat, the report we laid, Madam Speaker, does not carry in it a minority report. When we met and we finalized our report, as chairman, on at least 4 occasions, and all the members of that special select committee are now here in this House, I raised on at least 4 occasions the possibility, and I indicated clearly, if any member of your committee wanted to file a minority report, he or she was free to do so. At no stage, Madam Deputy, did any member indicate an intention, Madam Speaker, any member indicate an intention to file a minority report. And more importantly, no member did in accordance with the standing orders. As you would know, Madam Speaker, members of this House would know, the standing orders provide that if a minority report has to be submitted on any finding of the committee or the committee's work in its entirety, it must be filed during the life of an existence of the committee. That was not done. In fact, there was wonderful words of agreement from all. We congratulated ourselves. We congratulated each other at the end of the work. But lo and behold, I would sit in this House the following day, and I would hear, and I would read in the media subsequently, that there was something of a minority report. So I'm explaining, Madam Speaker, that you will find none in this report for the reason I've stated. Madam Speaker, with those words, and with pride, and in the spirit of thanks for having chaired your committee, a very important committee, engaged in a very important work, because the business of appointment of a commissioner of police is a critical one, especially the season and the time in which we now find ourselves. Madam Speaker, with those words, I wish to thank you, thank the members of my committee, and thank this House for your listening today. I thank you. Madam Speaker, in those circumstances, I beg to move.
Honorable members, I will now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that this House take note of the report of the Special Select Committee established to consider and report on the process followed in relation to the notifications pursuant to Section 123 of the Constitution. Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I listen to my honorable colleague from Lavantil West, it is clear that his comments and his editorializing of those comments moved away from the report which he presented to this House. Certainly nowhere in the report, in the conclusions of the report, there is the question of unsafe, unsound, and unsatisfactory. It is clearly that he is unable to conclude in a matter in which it is clear that the committee did not find anything illegal, did not find any bad faith, did not find any malafide, did not find any conflict of interest, and did not find any bias. And you know, Madam Speaker, my good friend, the Honorable Member for Laventille West, anchored himself with this polygraph testing, this security vetting. But you see, if we had the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to look at the final report and having had regard to the generosity with which we proceeded along, I would have corrected him and pointed to correspondence sent by the Services Commission Department to the Clerk of the House, dated March 26, 2018. Dear Mrs. Sampson Miguel, recall for papers and records. And the question was, Madam Speaker, for purposes of our record, at page 3 of the 4, did polygraph testing form part of KPMG Assessment Center activities? And I read what the DPA had to say, Madam Speaker. No polygraph testing formed part of KPMG's Assessment Center activities. Legal advice received from the internal legal staff dated 18 September 2017 stated inter alia, and I quote, "The use of polygraph testing should properly have been expressly included in the recruitment and selection guidelines provided to applicants, as those guidelines appear to comprehensively indicate the methods of evaluation to be utilized. Insertion of polygraph testing at this stage, when the recruitment and selection process has begun, may give rise to legal action being taken against the Commission. I strongly advise that having no specific mention of polygraph testing in the Constitution or the publicized guidelines, that it not be utilized in the current exercise for the recruitment and selection of the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of Police." Madam Speaker, but the legal advice goes further. There should be an amendment to the Constitution to cater for its use in future recruitment and selection processes if the Commission desires the same. End of quote. Madam Speaker, so it is therefore you had to have a constitutional amendment. So how can you now come and give a report and you suppress the information? Suppress the information, which is part of the committee records, that it required a constitutional amendment to trigger polygraph testing in this matter. Madam Speaker, I want to say that Madam Speaker, you know, it is clear that in this exercise, Madam Speaker, that there are certain important considerations. The second issue that the honorable member raised was that there was intimate, and I want to quote him, there was intimate involvement. There was intimate involvement and intimate involvement in a most overwhelming manner. Madam Speaker, you know, the honorable member for Laventille West, in dealing this matter, it gave rise to a passion for exaggeration. I want to indicate the details of the process as to the involvement of members of the Police Service Commission in this assessment center activities. Madam Speaker, 2 members participated at different times in the process. Out of, and I will go through it, Madam Speaker. In the psychometric evaluations, weighting 10%, no member of the Police Service Commission was involved. The effective weighting of the PSC involvement, 0. The panel interview in stage 1, which is weighted at 50%, one member, Commodore Franklin, participated in that process. The PSC involvement, 1 in 5, or 20%. And, Madam Speaker, the effective weighting of the PSC involvement in that matter through Commodore Franklin was 20% of the 50%, which is effectively 10%. If he was totally biased, it would be 10%. The written case study weighted 10%. PSC involvement, none. Effective weighting of PSC involvement, none. Stakeholder role play, 15%. PSC involvement, 1 in 7. That is where Dinanath Rampisoon PSC member participated. So 1 in 7, or 14%. 14% of 15%, Madam Speaker, is 2%. 2%. So this is what the exaggerator that is here today says, intimately and overwhelming. Role fit for the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, 15%. PSC involvement, none. Effective weighting of PSC involvement, none. The total, if you give total involvement of the PSC in this assessment center activities, is 12%, if they were to be totally biased in that matter. 12%, Madam Speaker. So how are you going to judge that as an overwhelming, intimate involvement in the process? I think that the editorialized comment of the honorable member for Laventille West really demonstrates, and the facts and the empirical basis demonstrate the level of exaggeration. What? And he said that he had no agenda. You know, it reminds me of a certain comment that was made. Don't loot. And then the people proceeded to loot. So when you say you have no agenda, I believe you. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, when this Special Select Committee was formed, I tried to place my mind in a certain frame because I recognize that first thing you had to do was to appreciate the historical significance of the independence and autonomy of the Police Service Commission, which is entrenched in our Constitution. So you have to be sensitive to that reality. Secondly, Madam Speaker, the Police Service Commission was established by the people in our Constitution to ensure that every citizen should have a right to equal opportunity of employment and promotion in the police service. And they had the right to be treated with fairness, with reasonableness, and with justice. The third consideration that entered my mind, Madam Speaker, that we are also very cognizant that this Parliament and parliamentarians and politicians are generally predisposed towards the removal of constitutional constraints imposed upon them in the exercise of their power. Yep. Well, these are the facts. My experience tells me that, Madam Speaker. In other words, Madam Speaker, generally, and that has been my experience, politicians view service commissions as being too independent and not accountable to them. Yep. That service commissions is a law unto themselves and answerable to no one. Correct. And of course, Madam Speaker, you would know that this is a fallacious view. They are answerable to the courts of the land and by extension. So when the honorable member reflected upon that, it is clear that he indicated that kind of predisposition in his comments, which were not part of the record of the final report. Madam Speaker, I was also very clear that members of Parliament as politicians are not judges and therefore have no authority to review the method by which members of the Police Service Commission exercised their discretionary power. It is only the courts can review. So when the honorable member pointed out that that they were not in accord with the law, and that he gave an interpretation of the law as a politician. I say, but he, in my mind, being judge, jury, and executioner. Because, you see, Madam Speaker, it is only the courts that can review a commission's decision under the separation of powers doctrine. So when you can come here and say that is not in accordance with the law, where did you arrive at that judicial opinion? Madam Speaker, another consideration that entered my mind as I was appointed to this committee by this House is that I was acutely sensitive of the role and function of the police service in a democracy. The police, in the exercise of their functions of crime detection, law enforcement, and keeping the peace, is independent of the executive and the servant of no one but the law. Later on, Madam Speaker, time provided, I will go on to reiterate what Lord Diplock said in the Endell Thomas case, that if the police service is politicized, then you have grave consequences for the democracy of the country. I will deal with that later, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I was also acutely aware that in a previous incarnation, that the PNM government had jettisoned the process for the appointment of a commissioner of police. Yeah, jettisons, Madam Speaker. But they had not utilized a special select committee on that occasion. They came and they delivered raw and direct. Madam Speaker, I want to put on record a quotation of the Newsday 13 July 2008. How to reject a police commissioner. And Madam Speaker, in Parliament on Friday, I read part of the excerpt, July 11, 2008, Opposition Chief Whip Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj alleged that Manning held a meeting with Williams at Whitehall, telling him, government has a plan. That does not include you. Our information is that the Minister of National Security requested Mr. Stephen Williams over the last few days to meet with him. The Minister of National Security then told the Prime Minister also wanted to meet with him, Maharaj said. The meeting took place at around 3 p.m. at Whitehall. The conversation with Mr. Williams was, government has a plan that does not include you. You are a young man, and government may have a plan in the future to include you. But we would like you to decline the offer and the decision made by the Police Service Commission. Madam Speaker, so that is the DNA of the PNM. So when I was appointed to this committee, Madam Speaker, I was acutely aware of that fact. But Madam Speaker, being the eternal optimist that I am, and the idealist that I am, patriot that I am, I recognize that this was the first time in our country that a special select committee was being appointed by our parliament to look and to provide information in this manner. And my good friend, the member for Laventille West, read out the mandate of the committee. Madam Speaker, so that therefore it is going to be a historical process. It was a process that, if utilized properly, would grow the democracy and not diminish it. Would allow for the evolution of the democracy, will entrench the institutional importance of the Services Commission, in this case the Police Service Commission, and that therefore the society would move beyond the stagnation it is currently in. Madam Speaker, so that you can recognize my level of disappointment with the contribution of the member for Laventille West.
All of us.
Madam Speaker, we had, as he indicated, 9 meetings, Madam Speaker. I attended 8. I was not there for the meeting because I was out of the jurisdiction on the police service, Police Complaints Authority. But the verbatim records revealed certain things, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if you look and review the verbatim records of all the meetings, there are certain recurring themes. First, in the public domain, there was the question of the quorum. The legal advice of the parliamentary legal personnel indicated that on a proper interpretation, that the Madam Speaker?
Members, I'm being disturbed at the conversation going on. I'm getting some difficulty in hearing. So if we could sort of just control our volumes.
Madam Speaker, so the first issue was whether the Police Service Commission was correct. And this was raised in the public domain, and we dispensed with that in quick time, as the member indicated. Madam Speaker, but it is with respect to the issue as to whether or not, and the honorable member made a lot of song and dance about it, that whether in the model of the talent pool strategy, whether they could have changed lanes. And from the outset, Madam Speaker, having sought legal advice, the Police Service Commission, in collaboration with the firm KPMG, decided to use a leadership competence model involving a common talent pool approach to assessing all qualified candidates. That was a considered view agreed to by all 4 members of the Police Service Commission. The use of this approach, Madam Speaker, was explained at length, and members grilled before the SSC on this matter. The fact that 20 candidates applied for both the COP and the COP made this approach attractive, since it made sense to adopt this approach rather than run 20 candidates through sets of tests. Madam Speaker, it led to a review of the job descriptions for both COP and DCOP. The Police Service Commission and the firm believed that core competencies and skill sets required for both positions were almost identical, and they explained this fully. It may well be that this also suggests itself, given the fact that by legal notice number 219, I noticed my friend only mentioned 219 once, of 2015, the qualifications required for the COP and DCOP are identical, save and except for the requirement of years of experience. One in the case of the DCOP, 10, and in the case of the COP, 15 years. Madam Speaker, the 2 jobs, as explained to us, can and were separated by scores when one applied higher level requirements for vision, strategic leadership, capacity to motivate and inspire, and full clarity of thought and policy minded thinking. We thought, Madam Speaker, that this matter was well thought out and very practical to apply. In this matter, again, Madam Speaker, the PSC acted within its legal ambit. The PSC indicated that in the final phase of the process, all suitable candidates at that time were asked whether or not they will consider another position from what they applied for, and they answered in the affirmative. But this was not, they were very clear, Madam Speaker, this was not meant to be an offer. While 2 candidates indicated that they did not receive such information, as my friend indicated, the committee had no evidence before it that the candidates were not told. 2 out of 12. So, Madam Speaker, when they created the talent pool strategy, it is clear that when they created the talent pool strategy, from the verbatim proceedings, this is what, and I will be very brief, Madam Speaker, as I quote from the verbatim proceedings of the 6th of the 3rd, 2018. Answer at page 24. This is a question being asked by a member of the commission. Through you, Chair, how do you deal with the notion that there ought to have been separate streams in the context of the leadership competency model for the DCOP and COP? This is what the managing partner of KPMG had to say. So if you look at the job descriptions between the DCOP and COP, it is not night and day. It is integral to the support of the leadership of the police service. It is a competency model to test skills that are required to function effectively at that level. One, the DCOP was merely to support the COP, so it was not vastly different. So the competencies required from both positions were equally important. Madam Speaker, so it is clear. It is very clear that that is the method agreed to by the Police Service Commission in collaboration with the KPMG. Madam Speaker, as I indicated before, that the honorable member made a lot of song and dance about the involvement of the PSC in the process. Madam Speaker, the question was the role and function of the Police Service Commission members in the work of the assessment center. The question was whether this could have led to bias, discrimination, and a lack of independence of the process. Now, what is interesting, Madam Speaker, that the PSC sought and obtained legal advice on the interpretation of the redacted legal notice 2018 of 2015. They were advised by senior counsel that they had to own the process and could not have been dictated by anyone or any entity. All PSC members agreed that this meant partial or direct participation in all stages of the process, and so on, Madam Speaker. And I indicated to you the weightings and so on at that stage. So there was a hybrid approach. And in this hybrid approach, the PSC satisfied their legal entitlement to own the process while allowing the firm to be a tool and undertake the professional or legwork in the matter. In evidence before us, Madam Speaker, that this was clearly acceptable in that the PSC did not violate the law. There was no legal consequence whether the PSC participated in this way or not. They were within the law if they did it in a way, this way, or choose not to participate. So that is, it's clear, Madam Speaker. It is very clear. And when you look at the comments, when you look at the comments of what Mr. George, Mr. Martin George, member of the committee, had to say in the verbatim notes of 23rd of the 2nd, 2018, that assessment is an assessment that the firm was contracted to carry out by the commission. But we had a duty to ensure that the tail does not wag the dog. So in other words, although we have contracted you to do the job, we have to ensure some level of participation and oversight so that we can make sure that we are consistent with our constitutional mandate. This is a lawyer, Martin George, talking on the matter. And in response to a comment by Mr. Diyal Singh, a question by Mr. Diyal Singh, Mr. George indicated, and we carried out both roles. So in other words, some members actually sat in and participated. And when those results came back, all of us would sit and carry out the oversight function. So they saw it consistent with their constitutional mandate as indicated by Justice Rajkumar, as he then was. Madam Speaker, it is clear then. So then the honorable member, and it is perhaps a bit of reference to his colleague, the member for St. Joseph. The member for St. Joseph made a lot of song and dance about the fact that the human resource component, that no one of the 4 members of the Police Service Commission had executive recruitment. Executive recruitment qualification. He wanted certification. Notwithstanding that Commodore Franklin indicated that throughout his military life, he was engaged in executive recruitment. Notwithstanding, Dinanath Ramkisoon indicated that he too was engaged in executive recruitment. What the honorable member wanted was that paper, that degree, that diploma. Experience was thrown out the window, and collectively, they had about 80-something years of experience, Madam Speaker. That is what they told us. You know, Madam Speaker? In fact, Madam Speaker, and I have it verbatim in the verbatim record, that the honorable, that the head of KPMG indicated that he was impressed with the skill set of the members who participated in the process from the Police Service Commission. So, Madam Speaker, you know, and the KPMG was chosen because through a competitive process. They have professionals from all over. They had a policeman who was head of the London Metropolitan Police, looking after 36,000 officers, come to advise us on the process in Trinidad, and you seek to fall KPMG. You see, when you have an agenda, it doesn't matter. Fact don't matter. Madam Speaker, another point raised was the issue of conflict of interest. And this matter, also the familiarity, was dealt with. Just dealt with. Members declared their interest up front, and a collective decision was taken by the PSC and the KPMG for them to participate. Because it was indicated in the evidence that no one member could have skewed the results. So where is the bias you talk about? So that the honorable member for Laventille West places a duty on the PSC to subsequently investigate members of the commission that whether or not they had a continued relationship. But the honorable member for Laventille West, I am told, I am advised, also knew Mr. David Dilalshan. Over 25 years, they were in the same batch in the police, but he never declared that interest to us as members of the committee, as chairman of the committee. So that therefore, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, so that therefore he never told us anything. So that therefore, did he come with some kind of prejudicial approach, Madam Speaker? Did he come with any kind of so that therefore, the KPMG, Madam Speaker, was contracted to do 8 specific security background checks, and they did all 8 in accordance with the contract. 8 specific contract, and they did that they fulfilled the terms of the contract. But the honorable member for Laventille West wanted them to go and investigate people subsequently. Well, I want him to indicate that he may, if it used that yardstick for judgment, he ought to have recused himself as chairman of this special select committee, Madam Speaker. And that, so by the same yardstick, but there's one for the PNM and one for other people in the country. So, Madam Speaker, you see, our leader is here now, and she had indicated to this honorable house at the time of the debate on the legal notice.
Your original 30 minutes are now expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to complete your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had indicated that these various sections of the legal notice was ultra-vires. And it is because of that pressure put, and when the judge acted, they put further pressure on the Police Service Commission because they now had to seek legal advice, senior counsel advice in order to guide them, and which they did throughout the process. Madam Speaker, so there was no question of a bias in the matter. There was no question because none of the evidence revealed nothing of bias. Where was the bias in the evidence? Not one iota of bias, but it's conjecture and surmise and agenda. That is what it was. So you have the evidence before you, not a word of bias. The whole question of bias when put before KPMG, they dealt with it. And we also indicated empirically how the bias could not have skewed the end result. Matters for, Madam Speaker, another issue raised was matters for special consideration. And the honourable member dealt with that. So there were two issues with two members. And it is well within the discretion and power of the Police Service Commission to deal with those matters. And they dealt with those matters. One in the PCA existing since 2011. And all of a sudden, resurrected in 2017.
What a waste.
You know, it was the Easter, Madam Speaker.
What a waste. It wasn't West.
You know, yes, it was not on the Eastern, it was a Western. So that therefore, it boggles the mind that that in fact took place. So the PCA itself has to be subject to some measure of scrutiny in the manner in which they proceeded in this, Madam Speaker. And we are of the view, Madam Speaker, that the Police Service Commission and the firm were totally forthcoming. They provided voluminous detail, answered every question, and they were consistent in their answers with the recurring themes, Madam Speaker. You had to look at them and and at times, Madam Speaker, I had to warn the chairman that he was badgering the former chairman. You know, badgering in order to, but you was taking an inquisitorial approach. So, Madam Speaker, so this was a novel framework, and the PSC was maneuvering their way in this novel framework. And they were congratulated by the DPA. I see my friend raise the issue of the DPA. The law does not provide a role for the DPA except to sign the contract. So, Madam Speaker, so what the member for Laventille as chairman indicated, they were nitpicking. You know, when you have a set play in football, 15 yards outside the goal, you have your kicker who will go in there. It seems to me at times there was a set play. Set play for certain. You would ask, is there a unique set of behavior associated with COP and DCOP? I don't want you to yes or no, answer yes or no. What? That is the kind of approach. We were a committee looking to find a way to build on democracy, not to diminish it, in my view, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with respect to the issue of the external support and advice from my HR consultants, they only did a desktop survey, and they qualified what they said, that everything that they said could be clarified by asking KPMG to clarify, Madam Speaker. My colleague will deal with the mathematical formula because, Madam Speaker, who was also a member of the committee, we have to look at the whole question of what went wrong. The member rushed his way through. Madam Speaker, we have a series of issues. If the honourable member had taken the time, same way I pointed out the polygraph issue, the honourable member had taken the time we would have provided a report that would have had the veracity to withstand scrutiny, rather than this kind of editorializing that took place. So I have, with respect to point number 14 in the report, we indicated that there was an answer for that. They had to make a short list, and they had a 60% threshold. I think the member indicated that. Also, the involvement of the client in the process is best practice. When the client has the final responsibility, the client can either passively or actively participate, Madam Speaker, because the client is recruiting. Madam Speaker, is a series of actions in this matter. But, Madam Speaker, it is clear from the comments that nothing precluded the involvement of the members of the Services Commission. Nothing precluded that. No law. In fact, they took the approach that they should err on the side of caution, and that therefore they over-involved themselves. Madam Speaker, an issue that was raised which the member made no reference to, and I understand party politics and the intricacies associated with it, but the Honourable Prime Minister in London on Tuesday, 24th April, reported in the Daily Express, and he goes on to say, Rowley said, and I quote from page 8 of the Express of 24th, Rowley said that the people whose job it was to find a COP are now before a Parliament Special Select Committee, which is inquiring what went wrong with the process. So they're inquiring what went wrong with the process. That was never our mandate, Madam Speaker. We had to make a finding, but before we even reported, the Honourable Prime Minister, he had made a conclusion. Yes. What went wrong with the process? That is what he indicated our role was. That was not our role. So the tone at the top set the agenda. That is what it is. The tone at the top set the agenda. Prejudicially, Madam Speaker. So therefore, and the Honourable Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, has a passion for embracing foreigners at the expense of locals, you know. Yeah. And I want to, you have INCAT. They believe in CAT and hostile, but don't believe the people in the Port Authority. Believe different things. Madam Speaker, don't get touchy, my Honourable Member Farouq Maloney. So they embrace, the Honourable Prime Minister embracing the foreigners for truth, whilst diminishing local content for truth. It is clear, Madam Speaker, and I want to advise and warn the Prime Minister, the last time a Prime Minister sought comfort in the embrace of foreigners was George Chambers in the Tesoro scandal. Madam Speaker, so the point that we have to make is that we sought not to politicize this matter. How much time have I? Thank you. We sought not to politicize this matter. We sought to deal with this matter in a way in which it will bring some measure of relief to what is happening, the rampant crime that is taking place. But we are also cognizant of the fact, Madam Speaker, that there is a presumption of regularity in the acts of public officials. So unless you can prove mala fides, bad faith, or some kind of interest that is hostile or malicious, then you have to support the decision taken by the Police Service Commission. Because you see, Madam Speaker, as I indicated previously, they jettisoned Stephen Williams out of that process. Now they're attempting to use the special select committee to jettison somebody who is not supine, who is not prostrated before them, who is an independent thinker. And that is what is happening here today. Madam Speaker.
That's a DNA. Control.
Madam Speaker, and I indicated previously that Lord Diplock had indicated. He said, he mentioned the prospect, albeit remote in Trinidad and Tobago, of an armed police force being converted to a private army of the majority party at the last election. That is what we have to guard against. And that is what this exercise is so important, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in today's newspaper, give me the COP job. Lawyers for Devdutt Dulalchan says. Daily Express, Wednesday, 6 June 2018. Lawyer urges PM to pick Dulalchan as COP, as cop, Commissioner of Police. Madam Speaker, you know, democracies don't die easily, you know, Madam Speaker. You have a coup, and then next day, somebody else in the presidential palace. But when you have elected officials utilizing the system to gradually wither away at the democracy, then we on this side have to stand firmly. We have to stand firmly. Madam Speaker, we say to the honorable members on that side, you cannot use your simple majority to deny the process of the Police Service Commission, that they acted within the law, they acted reasonably, they did not act irrationally, they did not act capriciously, they acted within the confines, and therefore, when they chose Mr. Dulalchan, this is what, Madam Speaker, that Commodore Franklin had this to say. There was only one that stood out, and that is why his name appears on both the COP and the DCOP. Only one person that stood out through the whole process. And that person, Madam Speaker, is Devdutt Dulalchan. Appoint him as commissioner. Or this society will regret the intrusion in the entrenched constitution, which allows the Police Service Commission to do their work. Let the commission do their work. Do not interfere in their work. And appoint Devdutt Dulalchan as Commissioner of Police. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member, I just wanted to advise you not dealing with the notification. Okay. Member for Labrie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me and giving me the opportunity to contribute to this motion where we are looking at the report of the Special Select Committee into the notifications that were delivered by the Police Service Commission, well, through the President. First, I have to thank the member for Laventille West for the comprehensive review he gave of the process that we followed. In my contribution, I will attempt to flesh out any details that he would have omitted, but sadly, I may not be as eloquent as he has been, but I will try my best. Now, beginning first, I need to correct the opening statements by the member for Chaguanas West, where he spoke about what the intent of the review of the report was about. Now, I'm going to read the conclusions of the report so we understand what we are discussing here. Number one, the committee, the Special Select Committee, believes that the direct involvement of members of the PSC in the assessment stage of the process was not what was contemplated in the order made pursuant to the Constitution. Secondly, additionally, having regard to the observations and findings set out above, the committee considers that in many respects, the manner in which the entire process was conducted by the PSC was defective and unreliable, and may expose the PSC to allegations of arbitrariness and lack of transparency. Madam Speaker, the member for Chaguanas West took pains to point out that this is the first time we are doing this. A Special Select Committee has been appointed to look into the work of an independently appointed commission. And there's a very good reason why this groundbreaking work has taken place. See, Madam Speaker, that independently appointed commission submitted through the President some notifications to this Honorable House. And of the 3 notifications that were submitted for our deliberation and acceptance, two of them are mutually exclusive. So there's absolutely no way this parliament could have accepted all of the notifications. So clearly something went wrong in that process. And for that reason, the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Leader of the Opposition agreed that this process, that those notifications, that be taken to a special select committee to find out exactly what happened there. Because under no circumstance could we just accept what was submitted. So that is why we are here. So Member for Shagwana, so you need to understand that something was wrong, and that indication that something was wrong came from the independently appointed committee. So that's what we are doing here. Now, Madam Speaker, I need to put this entire exercise into some context. What we are doing here is debating the appointment, eventually the appointment of a leader to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now, the state of the TTPS right now is far from healthy. And this is not my opinion. There's adequate evidence of this. We recently would have done a police manpower audit review. That report was laid in the public, which highlighted a host of concerns and problems within the police service, within the TTPS. Public confidence in the TTPS is at an all-time low at 30%. Confidence of the police officers in the TTPS is also at a low. But the problems in the TTPS are not of rules and regulations. The problem is about adherence to standards. It's a problem of performance management. And all of these problems point to problems of leadership. And that is what we are about. The whole purpose of the exercise that was undertaken by the Police Service Commission is to appoint a leader to the TTPS. And the process followed by the TTPS, as I have seen, as we have all seen, all the members of the committee who would have looked in detail at the work that they did, all the members of the public who would have listened to the public hearings, you would have seen that the process followed by the PSC was not in strict adherence with the intent and the letter of the Constitution and the order. There are numerous issues that we found throughout that process. Some of them are not so severe. Some of them you can classify as ill-advised, but not fatal. Some of the issues we consider as grave, and some of them we think are a downright variation with the law, as would have been indicated by the member for Laventille West in his opening deliberation. And there are too many areas of ambiguity, and those areas of ambiguity serve to undermine our confidence in the outcome of that process. Now, confidence in the outcome is critical, because for the Commissioner of Police to be effective in his job, he has to have the confidence of the general public. Public has to believe that the right person was chosen through the right process. He also has to enjoy the confidence of the members that serve under him. They have to know that the process would have thrown up the best person among all the applicants. I use he in the generic term. So if the process followed in arriving at that nominee was not rigid and valid, then the confidence in its outcome would be undermined, and that individual would not be able to function effectively. So this is what all of this is about, choosing someone to lead the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. One of the primary concerns of the committee was the direct involvement of members of the PSC in the assessment phase. And we believe that that was in direct variance to the spirit of the order. The order says at 3A, the commission shall contract an appropriate local firm, hereinafter referred to as the firm, to conduct a recruitment process, including inviting applicants for the positions. It says to conduct a process. It doesn't say to assist in conducting a process. So it really does not specify that members of the commission should participate in that assessment stage. If the Constitution, if the order intended that, it would expressly say to assist the commission in the recruitment. But it asks that they be done to conduct the recruitment. And this is why we went through all the trouble to engage an HR professional firm, because they have the expertise in conducting recruitment. And In conducting a recruitment, the firm selected, KPMG in this case, used the assessment center approach. Now, assessment centers are commonly used. They involve a variety of different techniques aimed at determining a candidate's personality and aptitude to perform a particular job. It's a combination of interviews, group exercise, presentations, examinations, psychometric testing. It's a suite of activities. Now, Member for Shogunas first indicated that we got HR expert advice. And the HR expert advice would have given us some advice around best practice in conducting assessment center exercises. So the theory behind how you conduct an assessment center. One of the key things is testing the validity of the exercises that are used. You have to ensure that the right skills and abilities are being measured. So in order to do that, you identify clear objectives at the onset, and objectives that should not discriminate amongst different groups of candidates. Now, from the evidence that was provided to this committee, there was nothing to indicate that KPMG really validated any of the testing that they did. So we have some concerns as to the effectiveness and efficiency of that assessment center exercise that was conducted. Now, in doing assessment center exercises, best practice dictates that since you have a series of exercises that comprises the suite of activity, best practice in assessment center activities requires that you don't have one assessor interfacing with the candidates on multiple occasions in different test scenarios, because then you have something called creeping subjectivity. The opinion that they gain from the candidate in one exercise would then be carried forward into another. See, the assessment center is designed to test your personality and aptitude under different circumstances. So if the assessor is bringing information in from a previous exercise, that undermines the validity of the outcome. So best practices do not have the same assessor interface with the candidate in multiple parts of the process. And the involvement of the PSC members within that assessment center exercise totally goes against that best practice, because we have members of the PSC involved in every single stage. The PSC have their role at the end of it. You take the objective results from the firm, and you do your deliberations and come up with what you think is your order of merit list. But when you have them interspersed in the first stage interview, in the second stage interview, in various exercises, you have that influence coming through. So whatever opinion they would have formed of the candidate in any one of the exercise is carried forward further. So you have a creeping subjectivity built into the process. Member for Shogunas West spoke at length and saying that, okay, in the interview panel, there was one member of the commission amongst 4 other members. So we say 1 in 5, but not in all cases, 1 in 5 equals 20%. Let me give you an example. There are 41 members in this house. Each one of us has 1 vote, but all our votes are not equal. I would paraphrase George Orwell. Some of us are more equal than others. For example, looking at the members on the other side. Each of you have 1 vote, but I know that the member for Superior, her vote is certainly more equal than any of the votes that you have. So when you have 1 member of the employer, when you have 1 member of the employer sitting on a panel with 3 or 4 other members, and the employer representative clearly has an opinion, clearly has a favorite, I'm certain that his opinion would hold sway over the others.
And as a chairman.
And of course, by his, I mean his others.
And as a chairman.
So to say that the 1 member of the commission being present in the panel cannot skew and influence the panel, that is being very naive and not living in the real world, okay?
Very naive.
So we know that the commission's opinion would supersede the others and would be paramount.
Especially the chairman.
And having a member of the commission from the earliest stages introduces the full suite of bias throughout the entire process. The commission had their full discretion at the end of the process. There was no need to have them inserting that bias from day 1. Now, the whole question of changing lanes. I mean, this is something that was of great concern to members of the committee. And in all the hearings and the questionings we had with the police service commissions, I mean, a lot of questions were repeated because we never got a satisfactory explanation as to how this worked, how it was done. We use a single competency model, but it's two positions you're interviewing persons for, so there has to be a clear distinction of the requirements. There has to be. Yes, it's an absolute necessity because the requirements for experience is not the same, and there's something that will be gained from that added experience. So a clear definition of the distinction should have been established at the outset if they intended to treat persons the same way. When you look at the details of the scoring, there's a score for role fit. It's a numerical score, but it doesn't indicate which role they were assessing the candidates against fitting. So you get 60% in role fit, but is it role fit for COP or role fit for DCOP? But despite the absence of that distinction, at each stage of the process, KPMG would have produced two lists. Initially a list with 5 names, and then a list with some 70 names. And identify one candidate as being suitable for both roles, but the other candidates were only suitable for one role, as acceptable. However, at the end of the process, the police service commissioners, having participated at all stages and being aware of that, at the end of the process, they produce an order of merit list which contain 2 names common to both lists. All along, they identified only one candidate being suitable for both roles. So at the end of the day, when you come out in an order of merit list with 2 candidates being placed on both lists, it is no wonder that a special select committee had to be formulated to look into what went wrong throughout this process. The issue of following the order. Speak about the second aspect of it. So 3B, the firm shall ensure that the candidates are subject to the best practice security vetting. The member for Lavantil West spoke about polygraph testing. The member for Chaguanas West read an opinion, a legal opinion that indicated that to introduce polygraph testing would require changing the terms of the engagement. But the order says they have to do best practice security vetting. What is best practice security vetting? Certainly, polygraph testing is one of the minimum elements that need to be included in best practice. A simple process as noting this is a commissioner of police that will be interfacing with the public, the highest order, the highest office in the TTPS. The public needs to have a look at these candidates to know if anybody has any objection to them. If we need to do security vetting, we need to get all the information that's available on these candidates to be able to make a good decision. Now, in the order, following receipt of the report from the firm, the commission is required to take into account all information on the candidates and thereafter establish an order of merit list. Now, we became aware of some information that was presented on 2 candidates during their security vetting that the commission chose not to take into consideration. Upon writing to the Police Complaints Authority, the commission received a report on one of the candidates in particular that indicated that in the opinion of the Police Complaints Authority, that candidate should be subjected to disciplinary action. Now, under the Police Complaints Authority Act, I mean, there is no obligation for the PSC to abide by any recommendation made by the PSCA. However, if you are engaging someone in the highest office in the land, and you are required to take all information into consideration on that candidate, then it is expected that the Police Service Commission ought to have taken that information into consideration. It is clear that the Police Service Commission, the commissioners had a difference of opinion, so they sought a legal opinion on it, on whether these candidates on whom they had gotten information from the PCA, whether this candidate should be considered or not. And the legal opinion is quite clear. Now, In the case of one candidate, the legal opinion clearly says to the PSC, as a responsible body, charged with the responsibility of nominating persons for appointment to the highest offices in the police service, one would expect the commission to have regard to any credible information coming to its attention which may demonstrate the suitability of a candidate for office. In reference to the other candidates, the legal advice that this PSC obtained, it said that it is not reasonable to be expected that the commission would nominate a person who, in the view of the commission, is or is soon to be subject of disciplinary action by the commission. Now, the legal advice ends that neither of the candidates is debarred from the selection process. However, the information in the possession of the commission, like all information on the candidates which the commission is required to take into account, so the commission of the question, the order may, if the commission so decides, impact on the order of merit list. The commission took a decision that they would, one, not further investigate the information that they got from the PCA, and two, disregard that information altogether. And this, I submit, is clearly at variance with what is specified in the order where the commission is required to take all information into account.
Say it again.
Because a recommendation from the PCA is not a simple matter of saying, well, we believe this. But now, the recommendation from the PCA, let me just outline what the PCA said in respect of one candidate. Based on evidence gathered in our investigation, the authority, that will be the PCA, has concluded that a case has been made out against you, the candidate, for commission of the disciplinary offenses of discreditable conduct, neglect of duty, and disobedience to orders. And as such, a recommendation has been made to the Police Service Commission for consideration to be given to invoke disciplinary proceedings against you for said offenses. Now, the commission determined, based on the judgment, that because the offense had occurred 7 years prior, to take disciplinary action at that point would be an abuse of process. I have no quarrels with that, but my concern is the information that was contained in that advice, in that recommendation from the PCA, is what the commission failed to take into consideration. When the PCA gives a recommendation, they give you a complaint, they give you a full dossier with all the evidence of their investigation, which would point exactly to why the PCA came to the recommendation that this particular candidate would have committed an act of serious discreditable conduct, neglect of duty, and disobedience to order. So the PSC had in its hands a file containing full evidence of the investigation by the PCA, outlining an act of discreditable conduct, neglect of duty, and disobedience to orders against a candidate.
Wow.
And the PSC determined that it would disregard that bit of information and still proceed to put that candidate's name on the order of merit list.
What a thing.
This has me very, very, very concerned.
Yes.
Very, very concerned, Madam Speaker. When we look at the order of merit list itself that was produced by the PSC, bearing in mind that the Police Service Commission participated in every single step of the assessment, had their people in there working through everything with their own influence on the process. All along, there was one candidate that they declared suitable for both positions from day one. They had a pool of candidates suitable for position one, a pool of candidates suitable for the second position. But yet, when they came to coming up with an order of merit list, they produced a list that deviated significantly from the list that came out of the assessment center activities. If the Police Service Commission had taken no role whatsoever in the assessment center process, it might be easy to understand why their final order of merit list would have deviated significantly from the firms, because they may have just taken into account other information. But given the fact that the PSC was intimately involved throughout the process, how then could they produce a list that deviated from the list that they would have sent to themselves at an earlier stage? And then we come to the issue of how they came up with their order of merit list. So we know from our conversations with them that they struggled for 6 weeks after receiving the report from the firm in which they participated. For 6 weeks, they could not agree on an order of merit list. And then one commissioner comes one day and proposes the border count method, which they saw as a salvation. And the border count method is essentially a vote. Each member of the commission would look at the list of candidates and rank them in order of preference. And based on the one that gets, so who you have at number 1 gets the most marks, and who you have lower down gets least marks, and you add up the scores, and that's how you get your order of merit list. But there are several issues with how the PSC would have done this. Because to start with, all the commissioners, again, were not operating on equal footing. Because 3 of the 4 commissioners would have had previous interaction with the candidates on the list. Some of them haven't taken part in the stage 1 assessment, and some of them taken part in the second stage, but 3 of them all being involved in the stage 2 interview. So some of the commissioners had knowledge of all the candidates, 1 commissioner did not. So it begs the question of how was that commissioner able to judge and rank the candidates? So there is that lack of unity, lack of conformity in that aspect of it. And then the border count method, by itself, using that as the final deciding factor. It means that clearly there was a lot of disagreement within the Police Service Commission itself. We know about the voting process they had to go through in determining which candidates to include, which ones to exclude, which led to the opinions having been sought. And then at the end of all of this, the result that they would have sent to the Parliament. See, the icing on this poison pudding was that this process, after going through this entire process, they spewed out to this Parliament 3 notifications, 2 of which are mutually exclusive. And that, if nothing else, that was the signal to us. That was the PSC's way of crying for help. They were saying to the Parliament, we cannot resolve this. Help us. This process is not, there's something wrong with this process. Give us some guidelines. Because they could not resolve where to put that particular candidate that they offered for both lines. So they left it for the Parliament to resolve. So nothing else but that should tell us that there is something wrong within that process. If not wrong with the process, something is wrong with the way they executed the process. But in any event, they left it to us to help them. And this is why we had this committee put together to go through the process to identify all the things that went wrong. And if you look at our recommendation, you see. So I'm very pleased with the work that the committee did. Okay, and I know the members opposite as well. They were very pleased because in our last meeting, they were high in praise of the work the committee did. Yep. We did what we were supposed to do. We examined the process. We questioned and we re-questioned, and many of the questions we asked repeatedly because there were things that we just could not wrap our minds around. And we knew that when we saw the frustration coming out of the members of the Police Service Commission, because they were also frustrated. When the border count method was proposed, the chairman she said it was like a blessing. It was like a miracle. They were glad to have something because something is wrong with this process. Our recommendation as a committee, recommend that the order made pursuant to Section 123(2) of the Constitution should be subject to urgent review with the view to the establishment of well-defined guidelines for the selection of a COP and DCOP. And this recommendation is valid. The mere fact that the PSC had to seek so many instances of legal advice on various questions that they came about, all of this tells us that this is a sick process. It is our duty as a Parliament. We made the order. It is our duty now to see how this thing can be amended, how we can fix this process. It is our solemn duty. So, from the information before us, Madam Speaker, you know I am frugal with my words. I don't engage in the song and dance and the theatrics. I like to get straight to the point and not waste the public's time, okay?
That's right.
information before us.
Truthfulness.
As I have outlined,
Clearly.
as the member for Laventille West has outlined, as the member for Chaguanas West did admit in between all of his allusions of song and dance and whatnot and all the irrelevant material that he brought in, he also admitted all this information casts serious doubts on the rigidity and integrity of the process followed by the PSC. The very fact that we are here doing this means that there was something wrong with the process, and the members of the PSC acknowledge that. That's why they presented their results to us in a form that would cause us to take this kind of action. Okay, so I and all the members on this side, not just members of the committee, but all the members on this side, we stand by the recommendation in this report, okay? That the process needs to be subject to urgent review so that we can establish guidelines for the Public Service Commission in engaging this process. For 6 years, we have not been able to engage a commissioner of police. What more do we need to tell us that this thing needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now? Once we can review this process, we can re-engage it and enable us to finally appoint leader to our police service, because our police service is crying out for leadership. I know that the acting commissioner of police, he must be at pains to be acting for so long. Let us work together as true patriots. Let us come together and fix this process. Fix the order, get some guidelines going so that we can appoint a police commissioner and a deputy police commissioner. Madam Speaker, I can do no more than to beg my colleagues opposite to exercise common sense and good judgment and patriotism, and let us fix this problem. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Before I begin, I must, at the very onset, congratulate my colleague, the member for Chaguanas West, for his erudite, enlightening, and incisive clarification of the distortions that were presented to this Honorable House by the member for Laventille West. I think history will record this level of clarification that he gave, so that when future generations analyze the discussions in this House, they would see that some distortions were balanced by a level of erudition and enlightenment. So, Madam Speaker, I listened intently to my colleague, the member for La Brea. It is painful to see a good person, a young, educated person, seeking to defend the indefensible. And surely, she must get kudos for loyalty to the cause as she struggled today to defend what was difficult. I will deal seriatim with the comments that she raised. The first point, she talked about, in the conclusion, the honorable member, she said, she spoke about the first conclusion. And she said the committee believes, the honorable member, she said that the committee believes that the direct involvement of members of the PSC in the assessment stage of the process was not what was contemplated in the order made pursuant to the Constitution. May I remind the honorable member for La Brea that there is a High Court judgment that speaks to the involvement of the PSC in the process of selecting a COP, Commissioner of Police, and a DCOP. That judgment was claim number CV 2016-01218 between Haridas Maharaj and Attorney General and the Police Service Commission. That was done, the appearances the team was led by the leader of the opposition, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, senior counsel. And in that judgment, yeah, before the Honorable Justice Peter Jamada, Rajkumar. And in that judgment, it was said that the reading of the above words in the provision, and it goes on A, B, C, and C, would recognize, and I want to read this slowly, and I want the member opposite to listen carefully, would recognize that should the commission contract a firm, as it is free to do, or not to do, as it chooses, it may provide by its contract with that firm the extent of the material it wishes to supply to it by that firm. And any such firm can only be a tool of the commission and cannot exercise independent discretion to the exclusion of the commission, except as expressly authorized, mandated, and contracted by the commission. End of quote. It means, Madam Speaker, that the Police Service Commission was free to contract or not contract, to become involved or not become involved. And that is a High Court judgment.
Which they never appealed. Huh?
Which was never appealed. So therefore, you see, when we operate, or when the Police Service Commission operates, it operated, as my colleague from Chaguanas West said, it operated within the law. And the suggestion from the other side is that they operate ultra-virus the law. It was said by the member for La Brea that one member, and when she was speaking with, the member was speaking with reference to the assessment and the scoring, and my colleague raised the point that even if they were totally biased, the two members of the commission who were involved in the assessment, the extent of the bias could not exceed 10%. And the member for La Brea sought to say that one person could have more influence, given the dynamics that took place in and the votes are not even equal. That is precisely the problem that we have from the other side. A perception that all of us are not equal, even those of us in the opposition. I want to state categorically that within our party, and I hope within this House, that each of us has one vote, and that the Constitution allows that, and there is no diminution by anyone who seeks to say that some are more equal than others. The member for La Brea further indicated that there were two candidates for which the Police Complaint Authority had concerns. And the member for La Brea sought to give the impression that the Police Service Commission was duty-bound and obliged to listen to the concerns and take on board and be guided by and be governed by the input of the Police Complaint Authority. Our understanding of the law is that the Police Service Commission is an independent body that cannot be subject to the Police Complaint Authority. They did the proper thing when the information was drawn to their attention. They sought legal advice, and upon getting the advice and consistent with the law, they in their own judgment, came to the conclusion that it ought not to be relevant to the decision that they made. And the question is, they sought legal advice. They did the proper thing that was required in the circumstances. There was a further question by the member for La Brea about polygraph testing. I think that was well handled by my colleague from Chaguanas West. We cannot about breaking the law, even in support of an agenda. The law is the law, and we have to be guided if we are operating in a democracy consistent with the rule of law. And there's a problem in the contribution of my colleague, the member, when she sought to the member sought to castigate the chastise the Police Service Commission for seeking legal advice. The member indicated that this was a negative. It shows that the Police Service Commission was charting new territory, and they wanted to have best practices, and they wanted more so to operate within the law, and they wanted to operate without an agenda, and they wanted everything to be above board. So at every stage where it was required, they sought legal advice. So, Madam Speaker, the question is, why are we here today? And we're here to debate the report of the Special Select Committee established in accordance, Standing Order 95 and 96. The mandate was expressly read out by the member for Laventille West, and I won't repeat it, except to say that it spoke about a dispassionate identification and seeking to clarify the process to see whether the process was consistent with the law and operated with best practices. The report that we are here today, Madam Speaker, recommends, and here's where the danger starts, it recommends that the order made pursuant to Section 123, Section 2, subsection 2, of the Constitution should be subject to urgent review with the view to the establishment of well-defined guidelines for the selection of the COP and the Deputy Commissioner of Police. Why are we, or why is that committee, the Special Select Committee, interfering in the autonomy and independence of a constitutionally autonomous institution? Why do they want to give guidelines? Why do they want to insert themselves into the selection process? But I'll deal with that matter later. So the question, we start, Madam Speaker, for a little background, as the question arises, what is the reason for establishing this committee? In order to assess the thing, we need a little background. Madam Speaker, you would recall that the Honorable Prime Minister, member for Digo Martin West, indicated to the Honorable House on the 2nd of February this year, and I quote to give you the context in which this report is being discussed today. And I quote, Madam Speaker, suffice it to say that as Prime Minister, I, like the man in the streets in Couva, Cedros, or Scarborough, had to rely on what was published as speculation or inside information in the newspaper or on television. Because the process allows me and my team, the government, no insight or involvement in this process. So when the process is closed, and it appears for the first time before me today in this way, as against the background of all that has been said, and all the disquiet, and I want to dwell a little bit on that word, all the disquiet that exists now in the population about the process, for this House to proceed without answers to the questions that have been raised is for the House to proceed without appropriate information that is required for the House to act appropriately and so on. So the Prime Minister told this Honorable House that there was a disquiet in the public domain, and it was important for this House to clarify. Not, Madam Speaker, not to get involved in the process and make judgments about the process, but just to see whether the process was consistent with the law and followed best practices. That was the job, the sole job of the Special Select Committee, as I understand it. But Madam Speaker, the agenda, and some of us have spoken to, there's a disquiet among us in terms of where this thing started, how it proceeded, and how a lot of the disquiet that existed in the public domain found itself into the questioning and the modus operandi of the committee and into the final report. So there is a clear pathway from, one could almost see an agenda starting from the public disquiet, leading to the committee, leading to a report, leading to this discussion. Let us look, Madam Speaker, for a while at the disquiet to which the Prime Minister, because he spoke about it being in the media. So, and I refer to The Guardian, February 5th, 2018.
and it is said, and I quote here, it's February 5th, former Public Service Head Reginald Dumas is adding his voice to questioning whether the Police Service Commission was properly constituted in the first place. So it's a question of whether it was properly constituted, which led to the recommendation of DCP Deodat Dulalchan for the Police Commissioner post. And then the queries, and this is the disquiet that formulated this committee. There were queries over in whether there was in fact a quorum when the decision was taken, and were they valid, and if indeed the commission was not legally constituted, then the entire process must be squashed. And then however, if the commission was not properly constituted, then it would appear that the decisions, recommendations made by that improperly constituted commission would be null and void, including the recommendations of Dulalchan and Phillips. So we see in the public domain questions being asked about the process. Madam Speaker, I refer also to the Express dated 27 January 2018. Sorry, it is Newsday 27 January 2018. And here's some of the issues that were raised in the public. And I want us to note, and I want Trinidad and Tobago to note, that a lot of what we heard today started even before the order was presented to, or the notification was presented to this House.
I know it might be hard to separate, but I want us to keep separate the notification from the actual matter that has been referred to the committee, which is the process, and what this report is about. It might be intertwined, and therefore we have to walk a very fine rope. Okay?
Madam Speaker, but the report which we are discussing today makes reference or points to similar concerns that were raised. And
except that the report we're discussing today is not dealing with a particular person. It's,
no, all right,
it's, and that's what I'm trying to get.
Okay, I am dealing with the process, all right? A source close to the nomination exercise yesterday alleged that the process was totally rigged. So I'm dealing with the process. And that was the disquiet that informed our discussions here today. The source, speaking on condition of strict anonymity, said although auditing firm KPMG was contracted to do an analysis of the candidates based on a point system, there was alleged interference in the process. Making the point that we see a thread being weaved through the system. The law states that a firm to be selected do a comprehensive analysis to select persons on points, the source said. KPMG had listings with merit points for CV, medical, operational reports, and a mock media conference, and a number of different things. When those points came, all the PSC was supposed to do was compile the points, set up the merit list, and give it to the president. It's the same thing we heard from the other side. It's the same thing we heard from the member for Labrie, that the Police Service Commission was not supposed to get involved in the process of assessment. But it follows the trend the picture is being painted in the public domain. The source claimed, how could this get in the public domain? So almost accurate. Would the Police Service Commission do that? Which body stands to gain by this disquiet? I'll read. The source claimed, however, that members of the PSC usurped their authority, bypassed the laws, and ignored KPMG's point systems. They decided to have their own personal interview to select somebody who was very low on the point system. Madam Speaker, I'll go no more, except to say that the disquiet in the public domain, which led to this committee, seemed to follow a pattern of consistency of information raised. So we have the disquiet in the public domain. What other lurking considerations form the backdrop to the Special Select Committee. And I referred earlier to the judgment, right, and the judgment, which showed a desire and a willingness by those on the other side to become involved intimately in the process of selection of the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. It was only when the courts ruled that they had to have an arm's length relationship that obtained. So we see part of the agenda, part of the thread, information in the public domain that closely resembles the discussions that we have here today. We see a backdrop of the state wanting to become involved in this process. And when we go back, Madam Speaker, to the recommendations to provide guidelines to a constitutionally independent institution, one gets concerned. I think my colleague raised the point about democracy and this creeping dictatorship and this looking for opportunities always to insert themselves in the process. That is worrisome. So what was expected of this committee? It was not constituted, Madam Speaker, to usurp and second-guess decisions made by the Police Service Commission. It was not set up to do that. It was not constituted to undertake a forensic human resource management and personnel management audit of decisions taken by the PSC. There is no competence, management competence, recruitment competence in any member of that committee, and such that they could make an informed professional judgment about the modus operandi adopted by the Police Service Commission. And neither are they judges, and not sitting to adjudicate on the process taken. Their only job is to see whether it was consistent with best practices, and secondly, whether there were any flaws or whether there was illegal. That is the only job. I indicated that there's no one with competence. The Service Commission contracted a firm, the SSC contracted a sole HR consultant. And we heard a lot about this sole consultant as providing the requisite advice to the committee. In the minority report which we submitted,
report before me. Okay?
Yes.
And I would also say that there's no alternative report before me.
Okay.
Okay? So don't be misguided.
Yes. Madam Speaker, we prepared advice that informs my contribution. So that advice, I quote from that advice. It said in terms of, while the committee sought and did receive external expert advice from a sole expert, this was severely constrained. And the expert was at pains to point out that she did the work with limited time and resources. The expert, based on the advice that I got from my colleagues.
So this is your contribution?
Yes.
This is your contribution?
This is my contribution.
Right, good.
Based on advice given by my colleagues.
Based on your contribution?
Yes. Who are members of my caucus. Yes. Right. And who are erudite. And who are informed and who are professional, Madam Speaker. The advice said that the expert contracted by the select committee, whom they relied on, and said that this person was capable of giving them the kind of support, a professional support, that informed their contribution. It said, the expert did only desktop survey of material set. That means they call that primary research. Sit down and you read some books and you analyze and you come up with a report, right? And did not interface with the firm or had access to the totality of evidence adduced over several days of examination. The result was a basic, elementary, and cold academic appraisal devoid of the legal and administrative realities within the PSC and KPMG, Madam Speaker. While it was suggested while it was said that this was not done deliberately, it meant that the advice was tendered in the context of an ideal and perfect world. So therefore, the advice that they relied, the sole professional advice was inadequate in many forms and in many ways. Madam Speaker, I have some other concerns. I read and listened on television, and I listened to some of how the modus operandi of the committee. And the modus is, the weave and the thread of the agenda manifested itself significantly. And it points to a significant point, that the committee was not constituted to entrap.
You. And I think you're bordering on imputing improper motives. And I feel that you can find another way to say what you want to say. Okay. So before you go much further, I think you could reset.
Yes, I'm reading from verbatim notes. And
just 1 minute. If you're reading from verbatim notes, are these verbatim notes that are part of the report? Or are you saying that you made certain observations while you were watching? Or yes. So if you're making observations while you're watching, it's not verbatim notes.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay. All right.
I was looking at TV and making notes, Madam Speaker. And what I noticed, and what I noticed, Madam Speaker, what I noticed was a tone that suggested preconceived notions. And leading questions were asked. And I'll give you an example of the leading questions. It was from one member of the committee, Mr. Dial Singh. And I'm reading, a leading question is a question in which the answer is expected, right? And listen carefully. It says, Madam Chairman, that is the problem. Because, Chairman, the border counter approach, like many other approaches, are prone and capable of manipulation. So he's asking a question of the member of the commission, and he's saying it is capable of compromising positions, burying candidates, teaming up and cloning. And that is why I have focused on the HR component of this process. Madam Speaker, that clearly is a leading question put to the members of the commission. And it suggests that the process was not one in which all the commissions came with clean hands, unbiased,
Okay. So, as I say, continue. I'm not going to allow that. Okay? Withdraw that. Find another way to make your point.
May I say, Madam Speaker, listening to the tone of the conversations and the questions, that they were in large part leading questions and ought not to be part of that process. But, Madam Speaker, in the report, it was, yeah, the SSC was established to ensure that the disquiet to which the Prime Minister referred and which allegedly exist in the public domain were not factual statements, but those based on hearsay, inadequate information, and outright falsehoods. The allegations were biased, right, that the PSC was not properly constituted, that queries about whether or not a quorum existed, we said that before, that the process was rigged, right, that the process was rigged, that the PSC had usurped its authority and had bypassed the laws, that it had ignored KPMG's point system. What we did not expect was that the disquiet in the public domain should color the modus operandi, dominate the inquiry, and find their way into the final report. It should have come, it should have come to the table with clean hands, a tabula rasa, look at the evidence, see where the evidence led, and then make a judgment. In other words, once there were reasonable, objective, professional answers to the areas of disquiet, they should have been dispensed with. These areas of disquiet should have been dispensed with and utterly disregarded. In this, I have serious disquiet when I read in the report fundamental and repeated lack of definitive statements, as if the SSC, as the committee, appears to be holding on to the allegations in spite of the evidence. And I'll give 3 examples. I'll give 3 examples. Reference. One example. The committee is therefore of the view that best practice security vetting as required by law may not have been satisfied. May not have been satisfied. It's just a tentativeness, a holding on in spite of the evidence. Another example at section 23 of the committee, the report. The committee could conclude as to the legal correctness or incorrectness of the PSC's participation. This is in the process of selection. So it could not conclude as to the legal correctness on it. A report ought to be definitive. You ask the questions, you get the information, and it is either factually illegal or unlawful or lawful. Section 46 of the report, the committee finds that the PSC appeared to have acted arbitrarily as the formula used to arrive at the order of merit list leaves the PSC open to the accusation that objective results from the assessment process were given less weighting than the opinions and preferences of the commission. So there is a plethora of, it could seem inconclusive findings. And the problem, Madam Speaker, is these inconclusive findings lead to definitive conclusions at the end of the report, which seek to invalidate the report. No, I thought, yeah. During oral evidence, the committee sought clarification on whether there was any concern that the PSC members may have held biases going into the process based on the knowledge of candidates gained through the administration of the PSC's oversight function or in any other way, and if so, how was resolved. So, Madam Speaker, we have examples of inconclusive statements that are spread throughout the report.
For Naparima, your original 30 minutes are now expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to continue to complete your contribution if you wish to avail yourself of it. There are 2 minutes before tea. It's now a convenient time to take the break. Okay? So that therefore, I will now suspend the House. We will return at 5 p.m., at which time the member for Naparima will take his extended time. Okay, this House is now suspended. We resume at 5 p.m.